All right. Today we begin with the leafy sea dragon as our first species of the day, found in Australian waters. Um, Super cool looking little guy over there. Feed on shrimps and other crustaceans, only in southern Australia. They lay about 250 eggs a year. Cute video there as well if you want to check it out. We have flying snakes, found in Southeast Asia, China, India, and Sri Lanka. They don't actually fly, but they do glide off of trees, um, kind of like flying squirrels do. They flatten their bodies to make themselves glide through the air, growing up to 4 feet long. They are not poisonous to humans. We have the Egyptian fruit bat, a near threatened. In 2008, they eat fruits, prefer forests and grasslands where they can find soft fruits. They have some echolocation adaptations. Females give birth, and the baby clings to the mother for the first 3 weeks. You can check out those links when I link the PowerPoints. And lastly, we have the blobfish, non-edible, about 12 inches long. I don't know if you'd want to eat something that looks like that. They're found off the coast of Australia and New Zealand. Scientists believe that at the depth where they actually should live, that they have a more normal shape and that they require that deep ocean pressure for that to happen. Due to very rare sightings, we have reasons to believe they are on the verge of extinction. All right, so today's topic is on Magellanic penguins and marine protected areas, MPAs. So today's whole lesson is based on one specific case study. One of the people who have been the teacher of this course at UW did some of this research. So this is a little bit more specific to his research. So I'll do my best to explain those backgrounds, but obviously I don't have the full picture here because I don't have his actual experience. So first of all, the ocean. The ocean covers over 70% of the earth, and yet less than 1% of the ocean is protected from fishing, is a no fishing area. So we know that there's many species that are highly reliant on the health of oceans, such as things that reside in the ocean, whales, fish, etc., or wildlife that feeds on food from the ocean, seabirds, turtles, marine mammals, etc. We also have approximately 1 billion people in the world who rely on fish as the main protein in their diet. So obviously the health and well-being of our ocean is important for many reasons. We're specifically talking about an area in Argentina today. People in Argentina are mostly immigrated at one point from Europe. The Argentinian economy is mainly reliant on oil production and fishing. So it's important that they're producing oil, but it's also important that they are keeping healthy fishing areas for their economy. So there's a lot of ecological richness in this country, a lot of diversity of plants and animals and things like that. And that is an important feature of Argentina. So again, something that should be protected. So as I mentioned, they produce oil for their economy. They're the fourth largest oil producer in South America. And they do rely on oil being imported as well. They have refineries and oil drilling operations up and down the coast. And that oil has to be transported from where it's collected to where it gets refined. So you can see these stars representing areas of oil drilling along that coastline. And remember, the other thing I said that was important for their economy was fishing. So notice how close we are to those areas. And you can also see in this picture, we'll talk about it in a minute, but you see this lighter blue here. This is sort of the continental shelf. This is the more shallow water off the coast of Argentina. Shallow water means lots of habitats and food and fish. And then the deeper ocean begins out over here. And so there's a lot of diversity and feeding grounds in this shallower area. So keep that in mind as we keep going. So fishing, fishing industry in Argentina provides over 20,000 people with jobs, making about $500 million worth of fish a year. The primary fish that they're fishing for is hake, which at the rate that they're fishing it has at the risk of collapse, which means the populations might not recover and there might see huge decreases in those fish. They've already collapsed the populations of the pescadilla fish and now are primarily fishing for hake. So again, that coastal shelf I was showing you, this is a really huge marine ecosystem. It's considered to be one of the largest and richest marine ecosystems in the world. So much different diversity of animals and plants that live there. It's very valued for fishing because obviously if there's a lot of food and other animals, there's going to be a lot of fish available for fishing. But also because of those stars on the coastline, there's a history of oil spills that can happen that can obviously injure and kill off wildlife and marine life. And then also overfishing has happened historically as well. And we've seen drops in different populations of fish. So besides the fish and the oil, this is one of the this is the largest colony of Magellanic penguins that live in the world. So they come on shore during certain parts of the year. So where the arrow shows you right there is a huge colony of penguins, and notice that it's between two different oil drilling areas. So that's definitely something to think about and consider. So Magellanic penguins are a long-lived seabird. They live many years. They're close to threatened on the kind of threatened list. They can produce up to 2 chicks per year, which basically means a pair of penguins can replace themselves each year. They spend September through April on land, breeding and molting, and protecting their young and feeding them, and then they migrate from April to September. And they are an indicator species, which means that if they are doing well, that could be a good indication that the whole ecosystem and trophic levels are doing well. And if they are suffering, it's a big indicator that something is wrong and there's some major disruptions in that system. And one thing that they indicate is that there's a lot of anthropogenic challenges. Remember, anthropogenic means caused by humans. So this bird right here is black due to oil from an oil spill. This one you can see has an injury on its fin, probably from a fishing line or a boat or some type of human trash or traps or things. And then this one is obviously wrapped up in some net, which is causing it great distress. So the Magellanic Penguin Project, this is the man who teaches the class sometimes, has been going on since 1982. It's the longest sort of research project in Latin America. And for the 6 months that the birds are on this patch of land each year and are not migrating, they are doing research and learning and tracking and documenting the health of the species. So here's an example of a pair of eggs laid by a pair of birds. The baby chicks, you can see him measuring, testing the different species. Now, oiling basically means birds that come in contact with oil. And just a quick explanation of this, I teach about it in my physical science class, but you all know that water is polar. Oil is nonpolar. Oil doesn't mix with water because it is nonpolar and water is polar. And you also know that oil is less dense than water, so oil floats on top of water. Well, guess what these birds have to interact with when they're exiting or entering water? The top of it. So if there is an oil spill, if oil leakage happens or larger spills or seepages occur, there's going to be oil floating on the water. Bird feathers stay dry because they are nonpolar. So they don't mix with water very well. It helps water stay off of them. It allows them to swim underneath water, but they're nonpolar like oil is. And so oil is nonpolar. It mixes with other nonpolar things like feathers. Water, no matter how much swimming they do, will not get the oil off of these feathers right now. If you've ever seen videos of oil spills and sort of oil recovery, Dawn Dish Soap does these great videos, but basically soap has a polar end and a non-polar end. So if you have oily hands and you try to wash your hands, you can't do it with just water. The oil stays stuck on your hands. If you use some soap, the non-polar end of the soap attaches to the oil, and then you wash it away. The polar end of the soap attaches with the polar water, and it washes away. So these birds out in nature, coming in contact with this oil without soap handy, are basically going to die. And so these are examples of penguin death. So in the research since 1982, they were looking at the percent of the dead babies, and 60% of the babies that died due to oil. And you can see a little over 60% of adults that were found dead died due to oil as well. The adults always a little bit higher or a lot higher. Remember, the adults are the ones going into the water to fish for the babies, so they're more likely to come in contact with it than the babies are. In 1997, because of this research and because of what they were learning, they moved the tanker lanes. Because remember, some oil's being brought in, and so they changed the path those tanker lanes were taking to try to prevent any extra spilling from happening. And we saw a dramatic decrease in the number of dead birds that died due to coming in contact with oil. So this was the penguin population at that time. Remember, in 1997, that's when we saw them changing the path of the tanker. What do you think is going to happen at the rest of this graph? Well, if you guessed raise, unfortunately, you're wrong. So scientists said, okay, well, we took care of a problem that we know worked, and yet the population is continuing to decline. So what else is happening? This is an indicator species, so we've gotten rid of what we thought was the problem, but we're still seeing that number going down. There is something off about the ecosystem that needs to be fixed. There is something broken in the chain. So they started brainstorming. Maybe it was competition with fisheries, with humans fishing. Excuse me. And so, what could be done to mitigate this competition? And the answer was a marine protected area. So in order to make a marine protected area that's an appropriate size, just like when you make reserve areas, you need to figure out the range of an animal and get the appropriate size. So they needed to know, where do the birds go, and what distances do they travel, so that we can make sure that they have what they need for that population and all the other ones in that same trophic group to be successful. So they started that by putting different types of satellite tags on penguins. You could see them attaching them here. I believe that's being glued onto the penguin and eventually it will fall off. Not sure though, not 100% sure. So these are examples of different types of satellite tags they put on the penguins. I think they glued them on and then when they molt, it falls off. But basically, when the satellite tags reach the air, it sends a satellite signal that goes to a computer and they can mark the presence of that bird. So scientists looked here and they were able to see the different paths that these different birds seem to be coming. So as you can see, all of the birds at this nesting spot were marked with red, all of the birds in this nesting spot yellow, and then we have pink and green as well. I believe those were different years that they had those. No, they both say 2008. Sorry, don't know the difference between those. So the big question, where should they put the marine protected area? Well, Argentina had a proposal and the scientists had another one. And so the big debate was, what is best? So Argentina government said, we're going to protect all land 10 kilometers off the coast. So again, you can see this is the continental shelf, all of this, and you can see it slanting and getting deeper. But the government said, we'll give them 10 kilometers off the coast. Well, will this work? The conservationists weren't so sure. Does it protect the area that the penguins forage? Doesn't really appear to. And so this satellite data was really beneficial and really helpful to be like, you're not really going to make a very big impact if you just close super, super close to the shore. Lots of evidence that penguins do a lot of fishing and gathering food further away. So as we discussed with our reserve design, if you want to have a good one, you want to cover the expanse or a huge chunk of where the animals go. When you look at this data here, it appears we have like a couple individuals that are kind of going outside of the area they chose to protect. So ideally, this is going to have a variety of different depths, which it does, even though it's on the shelf, there's some variance there, and it covers the majority of the area where most of those animals were going. So the big debate, where should it go? I think it's clear it should go what we have here in picture 2. So good news, the marine protected area was approved Thursday, December 15th, 2015. Research is still going on to figure out how effective this is, but scientists Part of their research to prove effectiveness and that this is worth it is to determine how long birds are out foraging and how much weight they gain. And they wanted to compare how long they're fishing and how much weight they have on them, both when fishing was allowed by humans nearby and when fishing was closed. And so this is an ongoing project. And so one thing that they can do is they inserted some of these birds with radio frequency identification. So literally it has basically, just like if your dog or cat is microchipped, it has its own little microchip in its leg. Doesn't hurt it, but each one has its own individual marker. You can see it compared to a grain of rice. It's quite small. And then they created these reader units. And when the little grain of rice or when the little monitoring tag walks over one of these flat metal readers, they can identify the individual. So that's the radio frequency identification, so that they know, oh, this is an individual we've weighed before. And so they came up with this design of these flat little weighing machines. And you can kind of see they put like a little silver walls on them. So a penguin walking has to walk straight across so that its entire weight will be on there. And what it does is it reads their little identification tag and it weighs them. It's a weighing machine at the same time. So it actually collected data, especially if individuals crossed over them multiple times over a period of months or weeks even. They could see if the weight of that bird was fluctuating, if it was keeping its weight, or if it was struggling and losing weight. So they would set it up to look like this. They'd kind of find pathways, like this one in the top right, when the birds would go from nesting up high down to the beach, and the pathways have natural barriers, and so they'd put however many weighing machines they needed to fill in the gap, so the birds have to walk across the weighing machine. Keep in mind, penguins don't fly. Walking is their option. And so by having those dividers, they can't walk on multiple ones and make an inaccurate weight. So they can actually, any of them that were tagged, they were getting weights every time they exited and entered the beach to go to their nesting sites. Got all kinds of different animals captured as well. I think that they would still weigh this, but obviously just wouldn't have a tag attached to that little bunny. So, was the MPA effective? Still, research is going on to determine that. They're able to tell how long birds are out foraging based on when did they cross over that weighing bridge and when did they come back. That will give them a good period of time, because they're not going to spend a lot of time just down on the beach. They're going to go back up to their nests. And they were able to, again, start looking at that information and compare it to when fisheries are open and fisheries are closed. So using that satellite and the tags and the weighbridge data, they're hoping to find all of this information and determine whether fisheries impact penguins. I tried to look up the actual results, and I wasn't able to find any yet. This is a more recent research study. So if I can find the information, I will share it on Classroom. Thanks, everybody, and have a good day.